If you wouldn't mind just introducing us and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back. Carlos Frank Rodriguez. This is my second appearance on your show. I think the first one was about 4 years ago. And so I am a veteran, and I am a business owner. And it's been a journey, and that's what brought us together. And I look forward to kind of both catching up on where we've been.
What's a little bit of your background?
With respect to family, second of six siblings, born in San Diego, grew up here in Colorado, currently living in Denver. And my background professionally I started post high school or after high school. I started off as a apprenticeship in the trades, working as a sheet metal worker. I would join the military a couple of years after that to go to school. And after a decade and a half there, moved back to Colorado and would ultimately start Parachute Group, a company I founded to provide small and rural businesses with access to digital technologies and just really take advantage of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. And so that's a little bit my background, kind of structured, but really it's always been kind of centric on, as I look back, technology and data and kind of those things.
What made you want to start Parachute Group?
Well, yeah, good question. I never had a desire to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. And, I'm a first generation, college graduate, and that's why I joined the military initially. And so for a while, as I was going through my military career, and I'd spent a decade there, as I got out, I used to think about, all right, what do I want to do when I get out? Because I just had this imagination that it would be so much different than the military. And if you go to school, it's going to be success. And so I wanted to be a VP of like a Fortune 1000 company and in the tech industry. And so when I got out of the military, I started going that way. And I was doing quite well. But I also, for the first time in my life, had some issues with mental health.
Fortune 1000 or Fortune 50? I remember you telling me
Fortune. I think it wasn't Fortune 50. That's too ambitious for what I was thinking then. I think it was purposely like a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000, right?
Okay.
It was low enough to be aspirational to me at the time. And so I started off with, I was working for Boeing right after I got out of the service. And
what'd you do in the service?
I was the slang term is cable dog, but I started off as setting up communication networks, designing and deploying, kind of the fiber optics, the wireless, and the copper outside infrastructure networks for large and small data communication networks. And that would progress more as I got older and advanced into a more specialized set of getting transferred to the intelligence community and focused on kind of the full data lifecycle, kind of information, communication, technology networks on a global perspective. And so I loved technology. I loved, being kind of as a project manager and operations manager and those positions, those roles, being able to work with the developers and the visionaries and the innovation side of it, but also the people, on the trenches, building and building the antenna sites or digging the trenches for the fiber optics. And so I could look back and say, I've always been in technology and innovation, but kind of on the front lines of it, and which has been, I can clearly see now, has given me a unique perspective on, especially, combined with where the rate of innovation and how the world operates post-COVID, to design, Parachute Group as a company that can kind of level the playing field when it comes to getting access to digital technologies, and not just getting access to them. We've got here in America, which was appalling when I found out about it, because I did this around the world for many years, was we've got this significant and growing multi-decade problem called the digital divide. And it's those who have access to technologies and those who don't. And I think COVID really shone a light on how big and detrimental the problem is when, everybody had to quickly revert to working and living remotely. And some of those had a laptop and some of those had, kind of technologies. And so the gap between Boeing and doing well corporately and kind of those 3 years after getting out of the military would be, and the formation of Parachute Group and kind of this new vision for a better world was, I had there's some mental health issues I had to address that went back from, not just my time in service, my deployments and, kind of life abroad, but also to my childhood and, understanding who I was. I say I took a knee from life for a couple of years to figure out not just more so what happened, where I came from, but where do I want to go? I had an opportunity. I say as I look back over this, since we met, almost 6-year journey of discovering who I am. Parachute Group came out, so it's not like I've wanted to be this dying urge to be an entrepreneur. As I started dealing with the mental health issues. Corporate America was paying me quite handsomely, but it wasn't, I can tell it wasn't happiness,
What about corporate America wasn't happiness for you?
Along this journey, I've learned to take ownership. So I'll say, starting off, it was my mindset. And there was an expectation of something that I had built up over years that just wasn't there. And then I would say the second point of what I didn't like about it was the human connection. I thought it was competitive on a level that wasn't honest or honorable. And given where I was at in life right then, I kind of just quit, and I was just doing some freelance consulting, and kind of that turned into some designing and developing some data systems, and ultimately Parachute Group.
So you were in the military. You get out, you go, you segue into corporate America. Corporate America wasn't for you.
No, it's when I met you. I moved into the Acoma. I was working first year of our that we met. I was still in corporate America, and that's kind of when we met. And I think it was at that point I had just was doing kind of the consulting that I was doing kind of ad hoc with really no structure other than, opportunities that were coming to me, was starting to form into a business. But at the same time, my predominant focus at that period of where I was at in life was I just come off, and we talk about it in depth in our first one, but I had just come off of, moving back to Denver into 2016 to go to rehab. Suicide attempt that had happened, a bit previously. Going all Charlie Sheen on alcohol for, there was a span of about 14 months that led up to me moving back to Colorado and kind of restarting my direction. So I say from that point is when everything I had planned and wanted in life, I switched to a new direction. And that is when I could say perhaps the seed of Parachute Group and becoming an entrepreneur was planted. But I had no idea, it kind of just formed, I think, as I had to accept these new revelations about myself and a new network of people.
What were those revelations?
I didn't have it all figured out. And as we talk about in the beginning, in that, the first time we talked on podcast was I was experiencing new emotions that I had never had to go through or understand before. Anxiety, in that lifestyle was kind of kept me sharp, and it was depression. The depression was sitting in, and drinking was now kind of there's no parameters around my lifestyle. It's just kind of me, and so drinking got out of hand, and I would say it was a huge, significant impact in my life that I wasn't ready for, that redirected me.
How was that moment again we can refresh that moment of redirection.
Yeah, that's you always bring these good questions because I don't know if it was a moment or a period.
Or a period.
Yeah, it's
Moments can be years.
because it's I think when people, and that's why I say you as you go through this, and if you take it serious, and you can attest, is in your book, which I read, uh, there's a moment where you're dropping friends or people that have been had a consistent place in your life and picking up new ones, and so those who you're dropping, and even family members who will look at you as you go through this, and there's no time frame for it, right? I mean, I'm on my 5th year since I put down that gun, put down that bottle, and picked up some new thoughts, some new books, that it doesn't look normal. And a lot of people, if I'm going to war against anything, again, in my life, it's this stigma of mental health. And how when somebody says they have it, they're put into a new area of assessment and judgment, right? And so it's a problem. But I think that was, what was the question again?
Go back to that moment.
Oh, that moment. So that was the moment.
Or the period.
It's the period,
Yeah.
I would say, of from putting down and deciding that I have a problem, that I don't know what that problem is. And for the first time in my life, I don't have the unit, I don't have the team to come up with a solution on a whiteboard and a plan of attack and all of this, right? I have decided to isolate myself. I've got this massive problem that I don't know how to, to handle. And, I was at a point where I almost decided to take the easy way out. Since then, this moment, the period has been, this just reflection of learning why did I feel that way, why was that almost an early ending to, had I just, I think, done what I'd done, give myself credit for staying the course for the last 5.5, 6 years to get to this point, has totally redirected train of thought, even the perception of looking back at who I was and where I came from has been altered by this moment of putting new insights, new minds, a new thought process. I think that's the simplest answer to hope.
So you have this proverbial rock bottom, whether that's a period or then that culminates into a specific moment that still continues in this period, right? And you decide to, redirect, move forward in life. You start Parachute Group. I also know, you also went through a bout of being homeless.
Yeah, and being homeless in America is it's just some in some areas it's policy and paperwork. But as I had started Parachute Group, and I was learning real quick, and it was costing a lot on how to be a businessman, and at the same time having to deal with what I would get diagnosed subsequently, within a span of maybe 12 months, PTSD, TBI, ADHD. And so, yeah, there was a moment when projections and calculations didn't align as planned, and money came in late, which don't mean anything. And so, boom, find yourself with that fucking roof on. Fortunately, by that point, I had developed a good network, and, we were able to address that issue and handle it. But you don't plan for any of this stuff. PTSD, homelessness, going all Charlie Sheen on alcohol. It kind of just springs up on you. And so it's a huge reality check. And, I think there's a broader story in what I've just discussed, kind of glossed over in the last minute that you and I will discuss kind of as it unfolds. But I think that is, if I am to look back at age 45, and as the founder of a company with a lot of promise and hope, was how did I get here? What's the story? What did it take, right? I have to wake up every day like we're going to be successful and we're going to meet all the objectives and we're going to have this vision where we're going to close the digital divide. We're going to, reskill veterans and give them opportunities from despondency to purpose, back to purpose and prosperity. Every day I have to wake up and like I'm going to be successful. And as an entrepreneur, which I had to learn, that mindset, it comes with a lot of accepting failure and accepting failure and bad decisions, not in a way that diminishes your drive to make calculated decisions. And I say, if anything, this journey, and I was fortunate to combine my mental health journey with my journey of almost subsequently, they started at the same time, with becoming an entrepreneur. Because, man, I was really able to pressure test just from coming out of this. And then if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to make mad decisions, not to feel sorry for yourself, And so I wouldn't, I don't suggest it, but, again, that was the hand I was delivered or the hand I picked up and played. And, on both my journey of mental health and journey of entrepreneurship, it's been the last 5 years. It's consumed me.
What do you attribute the most to that bout of homelessness? Was it your PTSD? Was it trying to do too much at one time? Was it just a purely financial break where just the finances don't come through and you could not foresee that?
At that period, I had, well, one, I'm going to say that it boils down to a decision I made, right? And a decision that did not pan out as I had played. So at that point, I had two, when these decisions that led up to this series of events started, probably well in, a year in advance, I had two rental properties, and, finances were a little bit differently. But I had two rental properties I just sold. So I had cash on hand, but I also had decisions and relative to the business and how to allocate resources. And we were staying at a kind of, in retrospect, a place I was paying too much for. But it was all right. So long story, way to stay. It was based off of decisions I made, decisions I stood by, and that's why, for me, it was just another. I went from essentially living in a penthouse to homeless overnight.
And what type of homeless are we talking about? Are we talking about you were on the street homeless, or are we talking about couch surfing homeless?
Yeah, so
there is a difference.
There is a difference. But homeless is homeless, right?
100%.
So I wanted to kind of put on the record and say I was a homeless veteran. Been there, right? It comes in many forms, and there's this misconception of what we want to see, and the person with the sign, and that's how I think we look at veterans. But as I can forever, for the rest of my life, say, I was once a homeless veteran with PTSD. I mean, that could never be taken from me. I fucking earned that.
How'd you feel in that moment?
I didn't feel it. For me, it was just another thing that had occurred. However, very quickly, I felt not like a hero when I'm dealing with the VA, and you got to go through some of their intake processes and the questions they ask.
How is it dealing with the VA?
I'm in this new path of life where I try and lead in with saying something great about everybody, no matter what. I think so. I think the VA is they've got lost in the mission. I think the VA forgets that their purpose and the reason why they exist is to help people like me and other veterans get better. It's the only reason they exist. And I mean, it's unprecedented that we were a nation at war for 20 years. And they are politicizing how good they're treating veterans. And they're really posturing and pandering and have turned the whole situation issue into a political movement to where veterans, we've learned to connect amongst ourselves, and so I would say somebody they're necessary, they're good, right? And so I think it's more so is there's a lot of you see all these new buildings and stuff getting built, and like why, you know, um, it's forced veterans. The way they are inefficient has forced veterans to become closer, and we've taken advantage and leveraged social media and technologies to band together, and that is why I think for the most part you're hearing veterans just you ask us, we're going to tell you, yeah, they're there, right? And we have learned to use them for what we can, but for the most part, as a taxpayer, I'd be concerned and I'd really be taking a hard look at where's that money going.
Where is that money going?
I mean, that's where I kind of stop. I'll tell you where it's not going as a person of why that institution, that organization exists, right? People like me, we worked for 20 years. Depending on how you put the number, on average, and again, both sides can argue this because the way they've racked and stacked statistics, but I'm going to go with a nice, round number of 40 veterans a day are committing suicide. And you can hear anywhere as it's spread from that from, I think the DOD says 18, 15, what have you. And there's the people that say up to, I think, 44, and that's higher. And so what does that mean? At 44 a day, 40 a day, and on average, each one of these veterans has, say, 3 kids. Start doing the math. It's almost 50,000 American children, forever scarred with the trauma of losing a parent to suicide. And that's what I think is where the message is getting lost. We're spending all these billions of dollars. I think it's the largest budget in that's out there, and it's a Band-Aid approach, and it's not going to veterans. I'm sitting here saying that the money's not going to veterans, and so it's an issue I don't want to go too far in because I've figured out a way to get through community what I need, and I still see the VA as mandatorily needed, but it's an issue that can be improved, and it won't be improved until citizens of this country get involved.
So you mentioned the suicide rate amongst ex-military, and we had talked, prior to us starting to record that about how to prevent suicide rates, and you can throw as much money as you want towards an issue, but if you miss the human component, the numbers don't truly improve. And by the human component, I'm talking about community acceptance, belonging, and feeling that connection to others and yourself. And you can throw the money at these causes, which a lot of causes do valiant work.
Yeah,
and
it'll
noble
start
work.
off great.
Yeah, and miss the mark because a building or even a therapist can't give you that community.
Yeah, and you also got to realize that a therapist, at least in my position, so I want people to know that I have a very skewed, in the beginning, once I kind of came out of got back up and, got enrolled in the VA system and their programs for mental health and PTSD, that it was very structured. And so now I'm almost reverting back to that mindset of the military structure, and I'm not questioning anything. They're giving me pills, I'm taking them. They're telling me to go to rehab, therapy for 30 minutes, an hour, a month, what have you, is for probably that first 8 months of it, this, I guess we'll call journey back into mental health. It didn't help me. And it didn't help me because they weren't taking into consideration everything else who I was as an individual. And what they were looking at was, all right, we got a 4-time combat veteran with PTSD, high alcohol content intake. We're going to put him in this program. Subsequently, after that, I'd get diagnosed with ADHD, a TBI, and PTSD. Each 3 of those acronyms are similar and overlapping how they present, but they need to be treated differently. And so it took me, a good 8 months, a year longer. I'm still working through it to understand that I needed to separate that. So taking my care into my own hands, understanding that those needed to be separated by three different specialists who needed to be aware of what's going on, and also I would ping pong through kind of therapists with the VA, and then I got involved into a program where I can go look for my own. And so for the last 3 years, I've had someone who I think understood my mind, and he was the one who took more of that human tailored approach to getting to know me. And so that's why I say I don't knock it, because the VA was there and it allowed me to redirect and pick up new thought. And that is where I'm at right now is so many more new thoughts and just a new network.
So you do give a lot of credit to, as far as the redirection and the shift, that the VA was there with its programs, with its therapists, that it did give you a leg up almost.
So I'll let you, as someone who pays the bill for all of the VA infrastructure, when I bottomed out and I decided to get back up, and I want to give more credit to the mindset and the resilience of the misunderstood U.S. veteran than the fucking VA, right? And I want to do that because there's no finer example than what America's sleeping on, is how well-trained and disciplined the veteran is. So once I got up and I decided to handle this and take care of it and figure out a solution, and I engaged the VA, I learned the system. And it made me become bitter. And it made me realize right in front of my face, while I'm trying to handle my own problems, that I'm mired in an organization of bureaucracy that's not effective. And it's why veterans quit, and unfortunately some of them take their lives. Fortunately, some of them have resources to get their own mental health care. There's so many good groups that have popped up to bring veterans together into community, like Frost Call. I'm on the board of that's nonprofit organization that just brings veterans together through community, through video gamings. As simple as video gamings, right? They have these monthly events where they're online and they're playing these games. But what is it? It's like minds connected, and they're able to just be themselves. And that's where this all starts. And so I had the good fortune to know the founder of that nonprofit, Dr. Wesley Sanders, and he's advised some of their board on logistics. But that's where I put a lot of my efforts in right now. Now that the VA redirected me to have a new mindset, right? Their inefficiency caused me to get kind of like just true to nature of who I am as a person. Their inefficiency caused me to become an expert in some areas that I never would have considered becoming an expert. And since that, I think my my mindset and being brought up in the military model, almost it goes to the testament of the training, that mission mindset of I have information and I can help people right now kind of consume my thought, and I would become focused on doing what I could to get this information out. And through that, you got to have the human centric and the community.
What are some of the biggest things you attribute to your redirection, to your positive movement forward in life now? What's a part of that sphere for you of healing, or that network of healing?
And sometimes I think, I have declared war on, the stigma of mental health and that. And so I like to kind of play with the words myself. And so I think part of it is understanding, right? And phrasing it a little bit differently. And I'm still the same person, right? That I was back then. But now I've had the courage and the tools and the abilities to look at why I made certain decisions through life, where some of them led to, some pretty low points frequently. And I think it was my gumption, some innate, some I, brought up and learned through, kind of my experience and military upbringing was to just keep going forward. And so now you do that for 4 decades plus, and you get a new level of wisdom and ability to look at problems and come up with solutions that aren't as painful.
I know you were also part of the Intel community.
Yes, I my claim to fame on that, and it sounds very lustrous, the intelligence community of the United States government. Um, let's start off there. I'm a cable dog, meaning I started off on the front lines of installing communication systems, and so to put it into a perspective for say maybe civilians to understand is how would AT&T operate in a war zone? And that was my job. I mean, that's the only a different kind of from a correlation. How would your local IT company or phone company operate in a war zone? And then so when you think that way, my claim to fame, and I saw, I mean, technology has moved so quick, right? We talk about this AI like it's this phenomenon that just started in the last 6 months to a year, what have you. Is no, it started with back in the military. And the military is always about a decade ahead of industry when it comes to tech, and tech about a decade ahead of government. And that just goes to, how innovation is funded. It's so expensive, so R&D and whatnot. And so being a kind of a frontline technologist and starting off in the infrastructure, my claim to fame was I could install cell towers. And there was a need for that in the intelligence community, and so I would go over there on what was supposed to be, initially I think a controlled invite, kind of 2-year tour, would ultimately turn into about 13 years of my life.
Previously we had talked about trust. You asked me what were my trust issues like at large, and my trust issues before my own redirection in life, my trust issues before, kind of my new path that, I was blessed to have several years ago, was that I didn't trust anyone. That when I go in to a room, I kind of assume the worst of what can happen.
Yeah.
I assume the worst of what someone's intentions may be. And
that's intuition, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I wouldn't say that's intuition. I would say that's a lot of training. And by training, I mean, when I was a kid, not only was I abused physically by my mom, just being beat, consistently, but she also did tell us, hey, never trust anyone.
Yes.
So that was instilled, and then there was another layer to that. And the other layer to that was when I joined a gang in LA, there's that same ethos. You can only trust us. Don't trust anyone else. And then there's prison, and then it's even fortified in prison. Like, hey, guys will smile in your face and literally stab you in your back. And to deprogram from that was a whole shift in perspective for myself and perspective for life at large. And the way that I became able to trust people was to go in and, one, understand that I'm not in prison anymore. I'm not a vulnerable child who probably shouldn't trust too many people.
Right.
That I am an adult who's capable, and that in order to move forward in life and get things done, I have to give people the benefit of the doubt and move forward that way, and to look at life that way, to give life the benefit of the doubt. And, not just give life the benefit of the doubt, but give you the benefit of the doubt that, hey, things can work out, and that, I don't just trust to trust. I trust others because there's a level of trust that I have to give in order to really actually get things done and move forward. Now, does that mean that those people are always trustworthy? Not necessarily. What it means is just that I'm confident in myself, knowing that even if this person turns out, and I haven't had this happen, but even if this person does turn out to be a liar, a thief, a cheat, I'm confident in myself that I can still carry on.
Yeah. So on trust, and we had great, kind of back and forth on that, and the perspective that I was coming from, and that's one of the things that I'm looking on, and in reconciliation with family members, with friends, comes also you got to revisit that, because usually in most instances of friction, there's a bond of trust that has been broken, right? And now, by way of, we'll say, my example of me choosing this journey, distance has always also transpired. And so it's, I looked back at, as I've gone through the mental health side, and it's not just, I want to say therapist, right? It's there, we're one tool in many, and most of it on community, that caused me to have a new shift in mindset. It was being able to look back at everything I've done without becoming bitter. And so as I analyzed my career in the intelligence community, and how I had normalized a lot of abnormal things, that created a mindset that kept me very sharp. I learned how to compartmentalize information. I learned how to assess people on the spot, and walk into a room and know right away, within mere seconds, is someone's there to kill you or not, and how do you kind of sit through kind of a meeting or what have you, and knowing it could happen, but you're gonna talk and smile at each other like everything's cool. So I think it was all of these things that had become now programmed, and you look at my ADHD mind and how I would take things in, and normalized it, and allowed me to freaking mask amazingly, right? And just suppress the anxiety and all of the external feels through, kind of a stoic approach. And so I had to look back at all of that, and on top of being brought up, by in a, my father was a gangster, right? Brought up in born in San Diego, kind of California, and we would, so you pile on, as from a child, I always had a self-preservation kind of thought, and then you pile on that specialized training, and then the fall, and then you now have the opportunity to look back at what trust has meant to me, all of my life, and now have the strength, and have put, the last 5 years on. There's some people that hurt, right? There's some people that I think deserve an understanding, and all of that. And I don't want to sit here and carry water that I don't own to carry. And some of them, I think that if there is to be, and some of them just aren't necessary, but I do think I owe a few broken relationships in my life an opportunity to understand kind of where I came from, and make their own kind of judgment. I just at least want them to know that it wasn't malicious. Some of it, a lot of it was the state of mind. And I think I put in the work to own my decisions, and at the same time, not use them as a crutch,
The people you're talking about, are you specifically alluding to maybe that you betrayed their trust?
It's all in perception. I can see how my actions and motives, and life, and say counterintelligence, and those mindsets, people don't know what I'm thinking, or I can use nonverbals effectively, and I think people may, I know people think maybe I betrayed them when I didn't. I think, and that's based off of not knowing what I was going to do, so filling in the blanks. I think when I realized that I was going through kind of the mental health stuff, I became more guarded and more closed off, maybe more combative on people who would try and intrude and find out, hey, what's going on? And so that's why I can look back and say that the red flags were there. But I can also say that some people, once they realized they needed help, they wanted to help me the wrong way. And they didn't understand. Again, I'll go back to my mindset, military mindset is once I realized that I was kind of on my own on this journey in the beginning, I didn't want anybody's help until I understood what I needed help in. And that goes back again. You're operating in a position of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to reestablish what trust meant for me to go in and have a conversation like this. Why did we bond? Why are we here talking about things like this? And, we both come from California, right? We come from kind of, our lives have intercrossed with gangs. You were in one, my father was in one, very, very high up there, career kind of criminal. You've been through prison. I went to war. We both came to moments in life where we were like, something's not working, right? In our respective professions, in our respective fields, we dominated for a long time, right?
A little more than that.
Right.
Nuclear bomb went off.
That's what happened.
I think it could be all the compartmentalization. They just
survival
cracked.
That's why veterans and felons, there's so many similarities there, right? Because you have to gauge people for who they are. You can't, in a prison cell and on a freaking, a unit team, you can't exclude anybody. You got to figure out to bring them in, and to do that, there's the hypervigilance. The risk is offset through hypervigilancy, right?
And you don't need that anymore. And
absolutely not. And so that's it, right?
You don't need it as much.
Well, it's you got to, there's some things. That's it. So I would say the analysis right now you have to get back to trust, right? But
you have to.
I think trust and people crossing boundaries, and it can get really interconnected when you're working on yourself. And how much not everybody should have access to everything you are, right? There is a certain level of living in that world.
I agree.
That I cherish and I hold on to, and transparency isn't the dissemination of information to everybody, right? And I think that's where, with technology, with AI, with this access to being able to collect so much data and do a lot of it, what I fear the most, what keeps me up, was the weaponization of information that people close to me collected to use against me. And now,
what information could they have that they could use against you?
Well, that's the difference. Is I'm no longer representing and protecting, the United States of America.
To rewind a little bit, so to the trust issue, right? Let's finish on the trust issue. You said you fear that people will use information that they know about you against you. And then my question was, what exact information is that? And you said
now or then. So that was the thought come from the weaponization of information.
So you still carry that thought from you being in the intel community.
Well, it's not a thought; it's a behavior.
Or exactly,
it's a lifestyle.
You carry
right?
that. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much integrated into you almost.
Which I didn't realize until, as I was going through it, I had the opportunity to reflect off of who I am as an individual. Why do I think
so?
This way?
How do you go into a room and try and see the best in people and don't think that they're out to hurt you, harm you, gather information on you?
Well, that's where I'm at right now.
So practice, yeah. So this is where you're at. I like that. Yeah, that's
because,
transition.
There's things that I can sit, on. Like, I was never I was shocked. I think as many veterans are when I got labeled with PTSD, and because I was the poster board for it. When you look back at what I put myself into, and so then you get to understand why you make decisions, why you do why you are the way you are. And so I think I am at that level of, there's still certain things I do that I know that are, other people don't do, maybe with respect to risk management and risk assessment. But I went through a program called CogSmart. It's this whole, you get a TBI and they teach you how to rethink. And there's such a thing as kind of top-down learning and upward learning or something like that. And so, like, when I revert back to, walking into a room on the civilian side, and you do a quick scan that most people will never see, kind of the eyes scan, right? It'll be just happen without Nobody knows. And so I think that's why I was able to carry on some of that abnormal behavior in the civilian environments after I got out. And so it's and the reason why you do that is because either training or traumatic incident. And so and so now the CogSmart and the upward way of thinking is when I walk into a room, don't revert to that. Give yourself something out to revert to. There's, you know, there's a puppy in that room that wants to wants me to pet it. And so go in with that, like a mindset like that. Puppy's not going to kill me. Zero probability. And so it was, do you see how it shift though? And I'd never thought about walking into a room to see a little puppy that wanted to see me. And so that's, I think, the new tools that I'm kind of using right now. And that's just, again, I'll give credit where credit is due. The VA put me through that CogSmart program, and it was a program that it spanned about 6-7 months, and I'd get assigned a speech pathologist. You know what a speech pathologist is? I didn't know about 6-7 months ago.
I can assume yeah, I'm not sure.
Has to do with the learning to. So I was slurring some words, and there was some concern, as we were going through the TBI stuff. But it's after typically a stroke, but also could be explosion or TBIs. Like veterans are getting them and having to address now. Your cognitive motor skills are breaking down, and so I would get assigned a speech pathologist through this, and by this point I was could critique myself and do it with a little humor and whatnot, but we didn't know if me slurring words was because I'm just lazy, tired, or there's a little legitimate neuro concern that we needed to address, and so we went down that way, and that's where I learned kind of the up-down thinking, and also how more insight and surrounded with access to a newer professional from very specified perspective on how the brain works. And I think out of all of this journey, I can come back and I can say, all right, what do we need to focus on for veterans to get better? It's going to be community. It's going to be eating right. It's going to be exercising. It's going to be giving meaningful work and engaging your community. And why were we so effective while we were in and we're not when we get out? Because that's what the freaking military makes us do, right? This overzealous commitment to community engagement and supporting your squadron outside of your day-to-day work. I get why now, right? And so it's again, like I think in everything, having the ability and the tools to look back and say, what do I need to bring out of what was some of the finest training in the environments that I operated in, and they did a very good job at. And now having this new opportunity to redefine kind of my perspectives and how I want to look at the future of work, innovation, life, and purpose.
I think that's a good spot to end.